we had you on the last time, that when we were talking about futsal, so it might have been the time before, that Iran do have a very good side, don't they?
They do. There are a number of different reasons for it. I like to think it's probably to do with the climate. So, in a incredibly sandy place like Iran, and also in an environment where you do have segregation of men and women. So for the female players, actually playing indoors away from male eyes, actually that makes sense for their society. So yeah, Iranian women had a very good futsal team. Again, Latvia, the Ukraine, the Scandinavian regions. Again, there's not much else to do during the winter months, so let's go indoors and kick a ball around.
Yeah, it makes sense. It does make sense when you look at it like that, doesn't it? I suppose, especially the Iranian side, like you say, in terms of the not segregation is the right word, but where men and women, it's certainly a very, very different aspect as to what we're used to in our Western society. So I guess that does make a lot of sense. And like you say, the Scandinavian countries with the weather that they experience up there, to be playing indoors in the wintertime would be an absolute bonus rather than having to play outside in their snowstorms.
Exactly, yeah.
There you go. There you go. Something to think about in rainy Manchester and Birmingham and places like that in the wintertime. Just out of interest, sorry, just out of interest, then, Blackadder, did we ever get to the bottom of why you call? Have we ever asked that question before?
You've never asked that question before.
No. Blackadder. So go on then, Blackadder. Where did that name come from?
A lawyer had a sense of humor failure. So this lawyer is still around. He's actually a very high-flying partner now in a major firm. But he was a young associate back at the time, and we were just about to do a refinance to allow us to buy our second care home. My dad was in the office signing the paperwork 11th hour, and the bank had asked for an extra hold company at the top so that they could put the debt in there, and it sort of controlled all the assets. So that an off-the-shelf company was used, company, I don't know, 4561 Limited or whatever. And the solicitor said, well, we need to call it something. What do we call it, Mr. Butcher? And my dad said, well, it needs to begin with B. Need to think about it. But in the meantime, let's just put in any old name in it. I don't know. And the first thing he said was Blackadder, Baldrick, Bin Limited. It doesn't matter. Just get a name and put it in. We'll change it later. The lawyer went off, came back 20 minutes later. Congratulations, we've got Blackadder Corporation Limited. There you go. My dad's like, oh, you're kidding me. You can't call a care home company Blackadder. Anyway, so he writes up to the production company and says, guys, you missed one. Can we sell you the company name? They said, no, you can keep it.
Oh, wow.
So we've kept it. And it's just one of those things that you walk into a room, hi, I'm Michael from Blackadder. No one forgets you.
No, I can imagine.
It's just one of those company names that just works because it's not, Amica Care or Four Seasons Care or whatever. It's unique and different. And I think it speaks to a lot of our values like that as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. See, now, when I heard the name Blackadder, I was automatically thinking of Edmund Blackadder and Rowan Atkinson, but I didn't think for 1 second it would be possibly related to that.
Indirectly, it's sort of a brain fart my father had in the early 2000s that has just stuck.
That's a good way to get a name, though. It's a good way to get a name. It really is. And a memorable, like you say, memorable one. So social care at the moment then. We chatted last time, and I know Gaz was very keen to get you back on, and then decided he was going to go to Abersock for the week. God bless him. So if you're watching, Gaz, enjoy. Hopefully it's a little bit sunnier there than it is here. So yeah, we touched on a little bit some of the challenges that social care is facing at the moment. The economy as it is, I don't know, it maybe, I guess we've been given a bit of a stay of execution from the tariffs that, the USA are placing on us. Whether that will have any impact on you, I don't know. It seems that it'll have far-reaching impacts on everybody one way or another. But I'd be just keen to hear a little bit more about some of those challenges that we're facing, whether that is from the rise in national insurance, whether it's the minimum wage, which we know, and I know from my time in retail, could put a lot of pressure on.
Okay, so I'll start with the good news because it's easier to be positive to start off with. My current thesis is that social care is actually in a really strong place. And I'm talking about the providers that have planned for this position. And I think most of us are there. There are counterexamples to this, which I need to come on to. But social care is largely robust in the face of a recession. In fact, actually, I think we do better in a recession than out of it, because retail hospitality tend to shed workers, and we pick them up in social care, and we often find people with great caring values who find a home and a role in social care. It might not be caring, it might be kitchen staff, it might be our housekeeping team, it might be maintenance, it might be managers. There's so many different roles in social care and just in care homes, let alone all the other elements of social care. So that's a positive. Obviously, local authorities tend to spend a bit more during recessionary periods, so there's a bit more funding that we can play with. And also with recessions come interest rate drops. Typically, we're mostly quite heavily bank leveraged. So if you're buying a care home, you're going to have some debt in there. So interest rates come down, so that helps us a little bit. So if you are positioned in a way that allows you to generate profit and generate a decent profit margin, therefore that 3 to 5% net cash margin that we spoke about before, it's tough out there. It's not easy. The national insurance increase, the wage increases that we're seeing hurt. But I think there is a sustainable core to social care. Just to give your listeners some context, by the way, we're now starting to see the impact of that national insurance increase. We've got the national living wage increases feeding through. It isn't actually just the national living wage. Because of the impact of visas, any overseas staff that we have have to be paid more. So they're actually on £12.80 an hour as a minimum, which means that because equal work for equal pay, our minimum wage is essentially £12.80, not £12.21.
Right.
So it's higher. So yeah, we reckon that our business, which is 15 million turnover, roughly 10 million pounds worth of payroll costs last year, I reckon that our payroll costs will go about £750,000 this year.
That's a significant increase.
That is a significant increase. We're lucky, I think, in that a number of the local authorities and the NHS trust that we work with have been supportive and have been able to get budgets that allow us to increase that. We've put increases into our private residents. That has hurt morally for me, because I've had to push that a little bit harder than I wanted to, because some local authorities didn't push as high as others. So I'm in the morally dubious position of asking our private residents to pay more per year, let alone more in absolute terms, than the local authority funded residents. That's not great. So yeah, I think we'll manage. I think we'll cope. I think we're sustainable. But at the same time, and here's the negative bit, it's going to get worse. Not every local authority can afford the fee increases that are needed. Stoke-on-Trent, for example, was subject to a judicial review. Last year, they put a 1.5% increase in their fees through. That's obviously below the rate of inflation. The judicial review was actually successful, but they still passed the 1.5% increase because they said that's the right number. And you've got the likes of Manchester, Liverpool, and major urban areas up north who are, frankly, underfunded. They don't have the money that they need to pay for the fair cost of social care to provide good quality care. And so fee rates of £650, £700 a week to care for an individual with dementia are pretty standard now from local authorities. And dare I say it, we're starting to see that creep down below Birmingham into possibly more affluent areas of England. So yeah, funding is going to become a real issue. And with that, providers are going to do the most natural thing. We're going to say, well, we're not going to care for you on £750 a week. We're going to focus on this high needs resident who you are willing to fund at £1,500 a week, or this private resident who we can charge £1,000 a week or whatever that fee rate is, because that allows us to balance our books.
Yeah.
And so individuals who would, they're 70, 80 years old, the early phases of dementia, who require care, but they can't be cared for in their own home for whatever reason, can't find a place in a care home. So they're reliant on more and more at-home care, which is either domiciliary care, which is becoming increasingly expensive, and same problem, local authority domiciliary care rates are too low. So those providers are saying, no, we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on the private market. And then therefore there's more pressure on families who aren't always local. So again, that's an issue, and it's more unpaid care, and therefore they're not working, they're caring. And then there's more pressure on the primary services, the police, the ambulance, A&E, wider NHS. And that's the systemic problem. So I'll start by saying that some providers are in a good place.
Yeah.
We're sustainable. The problem is that the system is creaking, and you're going to start to see care deserts where people cannot access care because the local authority doesn't have the funding to provide that. And you will see care providers close.
Yeah, I can imagine, and I imagine we've probably already started to see that for those who perhaps aren't that prepared.
Well, just to say, there is a company called Renaissance, run by a guy called Robert Kilgore up in Scotland. Scotland is slightly different in how they're funded, but fundamentally, he said national living wage, national insurance, closing that care home. He didn't want to, and he's very, very good articles about his decision. But yeah, he's been very open and said, I've got the rest of this group over here. This care home isn't profitable. I can't afford to run it, and these wage increases have just killed it off. So I've got to close it.
I mean, and this is the thing, So I have a brother who works in care, or used to work in care. He now works in Ofsted, and he's still in care because he's inspecting homes. But he was, he started off through the care as a carer, and then went on to managing homes. So I am sort of aware it isn't elderly; it is for sort of children that have been taken out of homes that aren't the best. We know that happens, unfortunately. So in terms of that, and it's very similar, and I know Gaz works in, as part of that industry in terms of the teaching. So the bits that he spoke to me about is, what they get paid for having certain students in there. And when you're running a business, and this is the key thing, anybody who, and like your parents did, they opened their own business. And the idea is, you're creating a living for yourself. You want to make a little bit bit of profit. You want to make it a profitable business. You are going to reinvest in it, and I'm sure when you go into care, you are aware just how much of that reinvestment has to go into it, or you'll find out very quickly, I imagine. So, there is that need then to focus on where the money is. So, like you say, there's going to be those people there who can't afford it, where you're getting sort of £750 a week for them, but you can charge £1,000 for that room, for that bed, whatever. If you're running a business, the bottom line is, which way you have to go. However, the one thing I do know about people who are in social care and who do work, they do want to make make a profit. They do want to make money out of it, but at the same time, that isn't always the first decision that they make, is it? The people who do that, and I take my hat off to them, the care is the operative word. You know what I mean? There's a little bit more to them than making a book, isn't there?
Absolutely. And we talk about running a care home business in that order of priority. Get the care right, get the building right, the money follows. And every single time it works. And it's genuinely annoying because it's my father's saying, and I hate it when he's right. But you're right, you've got to get the care right. It's not easy because people make mistakes and stupid things happen. And, you're dealing with people who have lived very complex lives, and they have very complex behaviors, and they do very unusual things. And that's just your team members who you're employing on the shift that day, let alone the individuals who are actually caring for. So yeah, it's tough out there, but it's immensely rewarding. And I say this as a finance director who doesn't get to go into the care homes that much. I mean, it is a complete ecosystem of an economy. We have marketing, we have sales, we have business development, we have R&D, we have software, we have technology, we have IT, finance, carers, maintenance. Whatever job you want, you could probably find an angle for it in social care. It's a genuinely rewarding place to work.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I know it is rewarding, and I listen to my brother and the stories he's told me over the years, and I do look at him with a sense of pride that he's my brother in many ways, because I do think it is something that I couldn't do. There's that recognition that I probably it's not within me. Maybe if it's my my children, my wife, and I'm forced into doing it that way, then I could, just because I love them. But when I watch the stuff that my brother does, and my other brother did it as well for a little while, I take my hat off to him, because I don't honestly believe that I could do it. It does take a special kind of person, doesn't it, to be able to do that? Or am I wrong?
I think everyone can find a home in social care. Whether or not that's as a carer, I think the role of a carer is immensely challenging. But as I said before, there's so many different roles within the gamut of social care, and I'm just focusing particularly on just care homes for the elderly. What about younger person social care, which goes all the way from children through to 18, through to we talk about there's a social care cliff that happens when you turn 18. You're brought up through the social care system, then all of a sudden, age 18, right, that's it, go fend for yourself. I'm actually mentoring a young gentleman down in Bournemouth at the moment, who's going through that process, and it's all about supporting him to gain his independence and his own how he can cook for himself and take his own medication and manage that part of his life and get a job and so on. And he's got a whole team of people around him who they're caring and they're responsible, but they're not at the elder person end. It's much more directive and about, okay, we're here to help you with your independence. And I think that's still social care. And that's a part that I think many people ignore. We have a huge need for mental health at the moment. And I think that the more people we can get doing level 2, level 3 counselling qualifications and looking at that pathway to support people in the community, that's a huge part of social care that the need is definitely there and is not being met.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of mental health, and touch wood, I've been very fortunate in that myself, that it's not something that's ever affected me. I don't believe so anyway. Others might feel differently, but certainly I recognize it more now. Like I say, I'm in my 50s, and the perception, obviously through the 70s and 80s, was very, very different. But now there is a real need for it. I think certainly, maybe the lockdowns and the pandemic sort of contributed an awful lot to people's social care, because all of a sudden everybody was placed in this pressure cooker of emotion and trying to deal with what's going on outside, and at the same time everybody's under each other's feet. What was that like in the care home, just out of interest? What was that like in the care industry that period? Or should I
ask? So it's been that. So I'll start with the personal. Genuinely, my birthday is the 30th of March. So the week before lockdown is announced, and I'm like, brilliant! Don't have to see my family for my birthday. Awesome. Just stay at home. Make myself a cake. It'd be great. We got very, very lucky as a group. So we were investigating back in 2019 modular properties and how the Chinese make these. It's like an IKEA building. It comes flat pack, you build it, and you can build a house in a day. And they build 60-bed hotels for workers on construction sites in about 2 weeks. It's amazing, the technology. My father and my brother-in-law went out to China in October of 2019. They went to Wuhan and came back with this god-awful flu. My mother caught it and then lost her sense of smell and taste over Christmas. So sorry, it might have been us. Yeah, ish. Sorry. What then happened was that we paid a hell of a lot of attention to what was going on. We locked down early. We even bought face masks in from China because we thought, well, if there's a PPE shortage in the UK, we need to make sure that we've got at least some supplies ourselves. But I very clearly remember being on the phone to our lender saying, I've got 3 models in front of me. One, business as usual, we're fine. One, which shows one of our care homes having a COVID outbreak and us losing 25% of our residents. We're fine. It's not pretty. I then have another model that shows me what happens if I have another outbreak before I backfill for that previous one. That closed our business. That second model. Second week of April, they were still early April, they were discharging residents from hospital back to care homes, and they knew that there was COVID in the hospitals. We couldn't test for it, but these individuals were displaying COVID symptoms. One of our care homes, which deals with very complicated cases of dementia and other complex behaviours, a resident was wheeled back in to the care home from hospital, and the manager took one look at this person, having never seen a COVID case before, and went, "That's COVID. What are you doing? Why are you bringing back in here?" And the paramedic said, "Look, I'm really sorry. This is our job." Wheeled him in, walked away. Within 3 weeks, 12 people in that care home were dead.
Wow.
So looking back, my honest personal reaction is that my memory is of a brutal pressure cooker of a time when my job as a finance director is to control the business, to make sure that I know what is going to happen and I know where the money is and I can move it around to plug the gaps and make sure everything's going to work. Everyone gets paid, everything works. And I remember going to bed and saying to my wife, I have no idea what is happening out there. And there's this existential threat to our business that I cannot control. I cannot stop our team members going out, getting on a bus, catching COVID, bringing it in. That could happen. So, yeah, and the entire sector went through it. And I think it was this very weird period where everyone, and I'm going to be unfair here, everyone had 3 months of furlough. That was the perception that we had. Everyone else has got 3 months off. They're getting drunk, clapping in their back gardens. Lovely weather, by the way.
Yeah, it was.
We're still busting a gut out here trying to work on the front lines. So I think there was I don't think social care ever said it, but I think there was a sense of it's us alone. And we're also trying to work with our kids, and our kids aren't at school, and a lot of the people who work in care are mums. So there was balancing that as well. So yeah, it was a really, really tough couple of years. It probably didn't stop until 2023 for us in terms of, actually finally feeling that we're out of that COVID period and all the regulations had dropped off. We used to get emails out from DHSC on a Friday. Friday, 5 o'clock. Right, this is what you've got to have in place for Monday.
Yeah.
That was fun. She's not going to be listening, but there was this lovely lady called Julie, who's a care home owner and manager down in London. I was part of a WhatsApp group, which she was on, and she'd summarize it. Guys, this is what the news thing says. This is what you've got to do for Monday. Here are the changes. It was that WhatsApp group saved lives. An amazing woman, Julie, but yeah, she genuinely saved lives with that.
Brilliant. You need people like that, don't you?
I've had the pleasure of since meeting her personally, and genuinely lovely lady. But we've evolved from that, and I think, and obviously a lot of businesses have changed. We've become a lot more digital as a sector, but very, very rapidly. So electronic care management systems are now de rigueur. You almost have to have them. We've got falls monitoring, so infrared or acoustic. We've got nurse call systems that are bouncing off our phones, so we can now tell who is calling in which room. We can use them as walkie-talkies across the care home. We've got electronic medication systems. We've caught up a lot, but now we're going through this AI revolution almost immediately after it. So 2017, we were still using paper and pen to monitor care. 2027, we will almost certainly be using AI to evaluate our care plans. That's a huge technical leap for any sector in 10 years.
It is. It's huge. It is huge. So I was in retail at the time, so I know exactly what you were talking about. We felt the same sort of thing. My wife is in banking, so she was still doing a job but working from home. I had like one child and another one born just before everything sort of closed down. Good evening, Stuart Willis, by the way. Thank you very much for watching. And it was a very strange time, but you're right. The way that businesses changed was I almost felt like it was overnight. Probably for your friend there on the WhatsApp group, probably felt like it was changing on a daily basis. And all of a sudden, we were developing these new ways of working, some of which were beneficial, some of which weren't, but we learned from them. But now, like you say, AI. How much of a part do you see that playing in your business then going forward? And how are you starting to look at it now already? I'm assuming.
Yeah. So we will be doing 2 trials probably in the next 6 months. One of them is on recruitment, which is that first screening call. So if you think about it, we've got roughly 275 people in our organization. We churn through probably about a third of that staff group every year. Natural movement, people who aren't working out, whatever. New entrants who last 3 months. It's an average of an average. So that probably means that we now probably need to recruit about 80 people a year in order to maintain our business. That means that we need to probably interview or offer to interview 800 people to find that one. So it's 1 in 10 recruitment rate. That first screening call is probably about 10 to 15 minutes. So what we're planning on doing is having an AI bot call that person and run through the interview. I've trialed it. It's 80% good. The next iteration should be 90% good. I'm genuinely excited about that. I think we'll also be using it across our care plans. So an AI that will run through our care plans and all the care data that we have and say, okay, resident X, here's what I'm seeing. These are some issues, some inconsistencies you need to watch out for. Resident Y, here are some previous behaviors. They're starting to demonstrate again. This will happen. You need to plug this gap. So yeah, I can see it being really valuable for our sector.
And isn't it mad that this is something that you would not have foreseen 5 years ago, or maybe even 2 years ago? You wouldn't be even considering.
I genuinely didn't foresee it 6 months ago.
No.
We looked at this very, very seriously 6 months ago, and the technology wasn't there.
Wow, that says a lot, doesn't it? And anyone on Facebook over the last couple of weeks will have seen action figures that have been generated by ChatGPT. Probably sick of seeing them. If and we play that part in that, of course, we do. We, as a podcast, we play a part in these trends. But yeah, it is absolutely mind blowing. And we use AI. It's a term that people get afraid by. That it's especially if you've watched the Terminator films, that this is the beginning of Cyberdyne systems becoming aware. But realistically, all it is a very clever algorithm that is searching and assisting, isn't it? But if that can save you that time and that staffing, and that's obviously a big part of of your work, then it's a no-brainer to use it and to utilize it where possible, isn't it?
I don't think it'll save us team member time per se, because what will happen is that we found when we started with electronic care management, we went very quickly into data analytics and using Power BI to visualize some data. That saved the managers time. They didn't have to go and build the data so that they could analyze it, but they still had to analyze it. What we're now doing is we're removing the analysis. So what we've now got is more time for the managers to go and actually do and intervene and produce better care. So and we're deliberately not targeting anything that will remove team members from the floor. What we want to do is make sure we've actually got more team members on the floor so we can deliver better care, because the care comes first, right?
Well, yeah, 100%. But in terms of staff retention then, so you mentioned those figures and what your staff turnover figures look like. How big a challenge is it in this economic environment keeping staff?
So I would say that the majority of people who we lose for pay are probably 80% of the people who we want to lose anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think you go into care for the pay. It's an important part of it, and we have to get paid right so that it works. But carers are not paid enough. Full stop. I could put £10 an hour on their wage, and they're probably still not paid enough. So let's not kid ourselves here. It's a low-paid job. Doesn't mean it's low-skilled. I'd say it's actually one of the more skilled jobs that I've actually seen delivered. So we as a society, we need to look at that and either accept it or address and resolve it. I think that we lose team members who stay within care because they see the residents leaving. So imagine you've got you join a care home, you've got a cohort of residents who are there. Again, average of an average, but most people are in care homes for 18 months to 2 years. It's actually sort of either 6 months or 4 years. So average of an average. And then sort of every 2 to 3 years, that resident group of cohorts, that cohort of residents just disappears. They've naturally moved on. And so the team members just say, well, actually, it's probably time for me to move on. I don't know anyone here anymore.
Wow. Yeah, I guess I suppose the thing is as well, like you say, you could easily put £10 in an hour on these people, and you're still probably not touching what they deserve. But the danger is, if you actually put those kind of wages on what people did deserve, you'd be attracting probably the sort of people into the care who just want to make the money and aren't going to do it. Is it's a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, isn't it? So, are you seeing, I mean, obviously from the sounds of it, when you're looking at how many sort of applicants AI is going to need to sift through for you, you are obviously still seeing the applicants and people wanting to come into the care industry then, obviously.
Yeah, I think, well, one, it's a robust sector. It's always going to be there. So there's sort of career security at the very least. I think we use a value-based recruitment tool called Judgment Index, which is absolutely I won't go into the history of it, but fascinating where it came from the sort of the US and the military. But it analyzes your values, and one of the values it's got is around self-confidence and sort of self-criticism. And it's the one trait that we consistently see people entering care with is this low self-esteem, slightly higher than normal self-criticism. And I'm on a personal mission to stop the phrase, I'm just a carer. That word just needs to be removed. But I think the two of those together speak volumes about the type of people we have in social care. Low self-esteem, they don't think much of themselves, but you sit there and you'll stand there and watch what they are delivering and doing, and they're superheroes, every single one of them. I completely agree with you. I could not do the job of a carer. What they deliver is absolutely fantastic, and it's a privilege to be able to support them and work alongside them. They're not just anything, but I think that's why we've been able to trade on the low wages in social care for so long, that's the cohort of people we're recruiting.
It's when you say that phrase, just to care, I mean, there's an old adage, isn't there, that really a society is judged on how it looks after those who need the care the most. And there's those people there who are really the crux of your industry. It's what keeps it afloat, isn't it? The people like that who will describe themselves with the word just and don't really, perhaps, well, maybe they do understand how much they're contributing, but they don't realize the value that they add to that contribution. The folks like me out there that simply couldn't do what they do.
It's really hard to bring it to bear. How do you say to someone you're valued? Thank you for your job. One of the best ways we've found, actually, and this is open to everyone. There's a website, carehome.co.uk. Huge push, huge awareness build for them. Every care provider is on there. It's one of the main marketing platforms. You can go on there and you can leave a review, and it's genuinely lovely, some of the things that people say. And it's not just, here's a 5-star review. You have to put text underneath it and explain what's going on. And you can do that for any of your local care homes. And do go and have a look. You will see family members leaving heartfelt thanks for the care that they've been provided. And, some of the things that have been said on our care homes are truly heartwarming. And being able to share that with our team members, that's the thanks, that's the value that they want. It's not from us as owners and as directors and annoying finance directors, or from the manager. It's from the family members.
No, I can appreciate that. Well, yeah. What's the name of that website again for those people who didn't catch?
That was carehome.co.uk.
Cool. I'll stick that in the notes as well. So hopefully they'll send a few people there so they can see some of that. And hopefully, maybe if they're not aware, maybe leave a reference there perhaps. So taking you back to some of the challenges then. So you dropped me an email about the stuff that you wanted to talk about. And anybody who's ever listened to this podcast in the past will know that I am not a big fan of politicians or the government. I'm not going to start beating that drum now, folks. Please don't turn off. I'll leave it there. But there's been protests, hasn't there, recently? And I do, as I said to you at the start, I in the green room, as it were, I do love it when people take to the streets and hold this government or any government for that fact to account. So did you want to tell us a little bit about the proposals put forward by the House of Lords and how they've been knocked back by the Commons and some of the protests that have gone on?
Sure. So social care is incredibly fragmented. We have, I think, something in the region of 20 individual bodies at a national level that lobby for us. And we have, I think it's 50 or 60 local regional care associations that we're also all part of. So it was very, very interesting when one of the care associations said, well, tell you what, let's create something called Providers Unite. It's a general banner that we can all get behind and just say, this is something, this is some action that providers of social care need to take, irrespective of what type of care you're providing. So back end of February, we were out on the streets in London, basically talking about the national insurance increase and saying it is unfair that the NHS has got an exemption from the national insurance increases, the threshold increase, but we as social care providers, who are, in our case, 50% funded by local authority or NHS, other providers are funded much, much more, that we should still be incurring this cost. At the time, that was part of the budget, that the House of Lords obviously has its say in the budget, and the House of Lords proposed back to the Commons that social care be exempted. That didn't get through the House of Commons, and they basically just backed it back and said, no, we're not accepting that amendment. Yeah, and our payroll costs today have those national insurance increases in. The Care England, which is one of our national bodies, has put a judicial review in about that decision to exempt the NHS, but not exempt social care providers. We will wait and see what happens. Frankly, I don't think that's going to get very far. But it leaves us in the position as a sector of saying, well, what else can we do? Every year in April, local authorities provide us with fee increases. As I said before, some of them have been positive. Leicestershire put through 7%. I think Herefordshire put through 7 to 8%. Worcestershire put through somewhere between 4 and 1%. Shropshire actually haven't given us any increases at all because our fee rates are above their banded rate. And sorry, just seen a message from Stuart, which has just popped up saying that hospices are cutting services. Yes, absolutely right. Palliative care is now starting to close. They're actually something like 50, 60, 70% funded by charitable donations. And the increase that they got from the government isn't enough to cover this. So, yeah, and that's the direct impact of this. End-of-life services, who are peculiarly funded, and that's a particular niche in social care, are having to close. And that puts more end-of-life pressure on care homes as well. So we're starting to challenge now. We're starting to go legal with our local authorities and challenge the decisions they're making about fee increases. They're obviously saying, no, we can do pretty much what we want, unless you want to go to judicial review. That's a £250,000 cost. So it's pushing us into a corner. And we are now starting to talk about what sort of action could we take. Something as simple as providers, we will no longer take admission into our care homes on a Friday from the NHS. You might see a rolling strike of providers where for 1 to 2 weeks in certain areas, providers say, we're not taking any admission. That's for social care providers to even be considering it is absolutely remarkable. The fact we were out on the streets is remarkable enough. I mean, we're a generally very passive and accepting sector. We We accept the challenge, we solve for it, and we move on. That's how we work.
Yeah.
For us to be thinking anywhere near strike action or anything like that it's saying something about the state of social care.
It absolutely is. I mean, I would say it's virtually unheard of, but it is unheard of, isn't it? To be honest with you, you know, and don't get me wrong, I can entirely understand it. You know, it's something that should be across the board. That application of the national insurance fees. Honestly, it beggars belief that you wouldn't be included as part of what's been rolled out. Now, just on the subject of politics, so obviously we've had a conservative government for the last couple of years, and whether I'll keep my personal politics to myself, but you know, in the past, I have always been a Tory voter because, well, I don't know, it's just a lot of it's how you're brought up. A lot of it, you know, literally, there was no point voting for anybody else around here up until recently, to be honest with you, because you were going to get in regardless. But all Fiona Bruce, so. I voted Labour this time. I've never voted Labour in my life, and I did it not because I felt like the Conservative government was punishing me, because I'm not going to say I'm living the dream and living a lavish life. I'm not, but I certainly did okay under them. However, I felt that there are those out there in the community that probably needed a lift that the Labour government, generally speaking, in the past, had been seen to provide and support that, you know, a group of people, and that's why I voted for him. And I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that. You know, has having a Labour government, has it been any different from having a Conservative government to you guys, or
no? And it won't be.
No.
So that's not a statement on politicians, though. It's a statement. No. It's a statement of economic reality, and just to explain, although I am now paraphrasing a brilliant YouTube channel called Kyrgyzad, which is a huge bastardization. If you've never not seen it, KURG something. They recently put a post up talking about South Korea and their birth rate, which is apparently 0.73 per children born per woman. Now, if you want to have a growing population, you need to have a birth rate of 2.1. 0.73 is obviously a lot less than that. What they're starting to see in South Korea is this downward spiral of the economy. And you're having a burgeoning older person grouping and not enough workers to be taxed to pay for that. The birth rate in the UK is 1.6. And it's declining. It's actually declining across the whole of the Western world. And there's a whole range of reasons for it. We are in the position in the UK because of quantitative easing, because of our debt burden, because of the way we dealt with furlough and the NHS, frankly, and other societal reasons why we have a slightly higher social cost in our tax rate. We're actually in the same position. So we have no headroom in our tax budget. You can only increase the amount of tax that people pay by raising taxes, therefore pay for these services, or have more people. We're not going to have more people because our birth rate is declining, and once you're in a declining birth rate, it only spirals downwards. And if you look at the forecast dynamics and the forecast population numbers, in 2060 we will have, I think the numbers are something like somewhere between 50 and 75% more people aged over 65 than we currently do, but the population number will be exactly the same. So the budget is going to be tight. We're not going to have the number of working people to pay for all of this. We certainly don't have it now, and there's no financial headroom in the budget whatsoever. So there is no way of solving this. Whatever your political hue, unless you start dramatically cutting central costs out of the government's budget, which frankly it is trying to do by what it's doing with NHSE, you can't solve for this. There genuinely isn't a magic money tree. And no. That's what the Conservatives were talking about. Actually, Labour was talking about in 2008. There is no more money.
No, and these are the challenges. Like I say, it's a government that I would say traditionally has helped those who needed it most. And I don't know whether the taxation of some of the larger businesses, maybe that's something. I don't know. I look to the States, we can laugh at Trump and we can make fun of Musk and what he's doing in terms of the cost saving that he's looking at. And, I don't know how much of it is true and how much of it is politicized and how much of it is just a great story. But I do wonder if that's something that we could apply here in terms just to reapportion where the funds are going. Maybe, I don't know. I don't want to be. Don't take me down the corrupt government route, please, Michael. Not this.
Oh, no. I was going to suggest that actually the answer is probably no, given one, our geography and our proximity to Europe, and our functional resources.
Yeah.
But secondly, because I think to do that would be an entire rewiring of the macroeconomic system. Yeah. So for me, and I have always considered myself more European than British, I think the step that I would take would be to actually almost a deregulation of trade, go back to freer trade, and the encouraging more people to have more trade across Europe, if you will. Yeah. Not trying to say reverse Brexit, but certainly have a freer customs union.
Not trying to say reverse Brexit, but why don't we reverse Brexit? I would agree with that. But anyway, we'll move on. I don't want to get bogged down in that side of things. So, just out of interest, then, just what changes would you like to see made? Then, we know, like I say, financially, we know it's tight. We know it's limited what any government could do, regardless of your bearing. What are the changes you'd like to see the next 5 years? And if you had Keir Starmer sat there in front of you, what's the one big change you'd need him to make that would assist you?
So that's the one big change. Okay, there are three things that I talk about, and I think all three of them have got challenges because I don't think they move the needle. They move the needle in different ways and they cause different issues. The first is really niched and nuanced and is a typical accountant answer. Social care, and in fact all healthcare, cannot recover VAT. Our services are exempt. So this means that if I'm buying £100 worth of good, I get charged 20 quid worth of VAT, I have to pay that VAT. I can't recover it. The majority of businesses in the UK can. What it also means that if I'm trying to build a £2 million extension on our care home, like we are, and that means I've got a £400,000 VAT bill, it makes building new care home beds far more expensive. Last year, we added 87 net beds into elder person social care. We have an elderly population that is growing. We have more care needs and more care demands. That doesn't make sense. Part of the reason for that is the cost of building. You can't do much on the materials. You could do something with VAT. It's going to recover something like £250 million a year into social care. It's not a huge number. It's something, and at least it's directed towards social care, and it's saying, look, here is a specific measure. I've listened. I've done something. Yeah. That's probably a low needle movement, but at least it's directive. The second thing is to do something with national insurance. I wouldn't change the percentages. I'd probably look at the secondary threshold, which is where the biggest increase is, I think, and bring us in line with the NHS. And that would then start the ball rolling on an alignment of the NHS and social care and better integration between the two. It is nuts that the policy for social care is set by DHSC, Department of Health and Social Care, but the budgets are largely controlled by the Department of Homes and Community and Local Government because they fund the local authority. So the DHSC could literally say, we want all care homes to do, have a gold knocker on the door. And DHCLG could say, you're not getting any more money for it, though. So you could do that.
There's a bit of a disconnect, those.
Yeah, so that needs to change. The third thing that I would change, and this is the This is the one that I think this would fundamentally change how social care works. I would nationalize it. And you are now talking about hundreds of billions of pounds spent. But I think we need to reevaluate where social care is and where it has come from. Social care evolved in the 1950s from the creation of the NHS. And the NHS was this break-fix model. If you're broken and it's critical, we'll fix you over here, and then we'll put you back out into the community. Up until the 1980s, that was a local authority funded piece. In the 1980s, Thatcher allowed the privatization of it. And that's where we got to today. And you're now in the position where that model is creaking, because you've got the NHS increasingly funding. 4.2 billion pounds of NHS funding went directly into social care last year, alongside local authority investment. The 50, 60, 70% of local authority budgets is spent on social care. And to pick a local authority that I happen to know the figures of, there are 25 people in Gloucestershire earning more than £150,000 a year, of whom 18 of them are largely involved in social care, if I include the CEO and the CFO. This is a model that where these political groups and these political powerhouses are growing up within our public structures, within local authorities, within the NHS, where people are not going to relinquish this control unless you get around a table and say, actually, you know what, we're just going to have to flatten this. You couldn't privatize it completely. So, all funding would be for private individuals. That doesn't work. There has to be an element of social funding. So the solution there is to nationalize the whole thing. That is an incredibly expensive proposition, but it also gets around the fact that the majority of social care has some element of debt or third-party equity funding in it. So let's take an example. HC1, one of the largest providers of social care, they were running 12% interest costs in their financial year 2023. So when you start to factor that up, if they've got £100 million worth of debt, that's £12 million that's leaving their business and going to a bank. You've got Four Seasons, who historically they over leveraged, private equity backed. That business has now got more debt than asset value to it. And there's private equity in there taking fees, taking consultants' money, and it's leaving the sector. If you nationalized or even had a buyout of the care home business, of the care homes themselves, so you had operators running the care, but the properties were owned by the government and there was rent being paid, you would avoid this passive money leaving social care, leaving government coffers and going to third-party equity and private money and private funders. So it becomes more circular within social care, within government. That would be my third proposal, but there is that magic money tree has definitely sailed, I think, and that would be a very, very difficult thing to get through any government.
Wasn't the answer I was expecting, but yeah, I can personally, I can see the logic behind it. And I do think, that is often the case. In terms of the NHS in general, a lot of the problem isn't necessarily the money that gets put into it; it's the money that gets taken out of it in certain environments. And don't get me started on pharmaceutical companies and what have you, because the costs that involve there are absolutely huge. But unfortunately, where you have a business and there is money to be made, that people do want to make a profit out of it, and that's the whole point of what they're investing in the money, and that's just part of the challenges that's facing. So one of the things I'd like to talk about, we'll move on a little bit from social care, but hopefully it's a bit more upbeat. But one of the other interests that you stated at the start is futsal.
Yeah.
So we every time we've got you on, we're around about the hour mark, so I already know we're going to run over because there's something else I want to talk to you about as well before we close out. Did you want to tell us a little bit about what's been happening in the world of futsal since you last joined us?
What's been happening? Well, England. Oh, it's gutting, isn't it? Sorry, I've just looked up the score. There we are. So England have been playing in the UEFA Futsal Euro qualifications. We've done all right, to be fair. We beat Switzerland back in December. Some great matches against Spain and Bosnia and Herzegovina. But we were away at Switzerland tonight, where we've drawn 4-4. We were 3-2 up at half time, so that's a bit of a disappointment, actually. So I think that's great. I think futsal on a national level is getting back. We're starting to see the women's game and the under-19s games teams starting to be selected and coming through. That's not the FA that's doing it. They've actually outsourced the governance to an entity called England Futsal. So it's been interesting watching a new governing body take shape and very quickly get up to speed. There was a webinar last week, maybe the week before, where they set out their DNA, their philosophy of what they want to see in an England futsal player. It is interesting how different that is to the FA's DNA. It's very much about emotional intelligence. It's about being direct, dribbling, taking players on, being really good in space. So it's much more Joe Cole than Grealish, I think, is probably the best way of putting it. So hopefully we're going to see some really exciting futsal players coming through the ranks as a result of that. And starting to see hopefully getting more people interested in futsal, because I think it's more centered around what I think grassroots football philosophy and DNA is, rather than the professional game. So that's exciting. And they're even doing a summer, some futsal camps. Actually, why I'm sat here today, they've got one in Warwick, which my son's attending for the next couple of days. Come along, try futsal for a couple of days as a kid, which is great. And the team that I support, Wessex, are currently 6th in the National Futsal Series. Couple of games left, but there are only 2 points between. I wrote this down earlier. Sorry, 2 points between 4th and 8th place in the league. So nice and tight. So it's going to be really interesting into the season.
Absolutely. And the other bit that you mentioned in your email as well about, was the FA mandating 3v3s for under-7 football?
Yeah.
Well, how much of a difference is that going to make then?
Okay, here's a hobby horse, right? I think so. This is a format of the game that has been applied very successfully across Europe. The Germans did it about 2008, I want to say. They went through this. They got knocked out of the World Cup. Huge review, tore everything up. Said, right, we've got to change it. But we're doing this for 20 years' time. We're not doing it for now. So they created this concept called Funball, which is 3v3, small pitches, one adult supervising, not refereeing, and just watching them play and just getting the ball rolling. It's kick-ins, no throw-ins. All the free kicks are indirect. There are no penalties. Just go and play. Be kids. Enjoy yourself. What I am hoping is that this creates a better environment for the players, because the parents are going to look at this and go, this is as far removed from 11-a-side football as we can possibly get. I think you're going to see massive resistance against it, because the coaches involved are saying, I don't want to be playing 3v3. I want to be playing football. And getting the adults out of football and going, no, this is for the kids. This is children's football, is really important. And I think what the FA has been very clever about is they've changed the format age groups. So you play 3v3, 5v5, 7v7 when you're in primary school up to age 11, year 6. And then after that, when you're in senior school, 9v9, 11v11, which is where you get offsides and bigger goals. And that, I think, is where you're going to have this. You see a difference in the game. It goes from being children's football to younger adults football, and then you've got adult football, proper football when you're aged 18. And I think that's the exciting thing about where the game's going. Will we get better players out of it? Yes, because they'll be involved for longer. They'll have more opportunity to be involved, and they should be more skillful because they're used to working in tighter areas at a younger age group. So the technique has to be better. And you're going to see more futsal in the world as well. So therefore, they're going to be better because they're playing more futsal.
100%. Now, I've got a 5-year-old son. He's 6 very, very soon. Now, he is just, he's just finding the world of football, mainly because he loves numbers. He loves
Yeah.
mathematics. So he's obsessed with the figures. He's obsessed with points totals and everything like that, and the tables. And he is slowly but surely getting interested into how those results come to be, why Arsenal are getting that extra 3 points this weekend. I say that as an Arsenal fan, doesn't always happen that way. But yeah, and he is just getting bought into it. I do think that kind of format where it's fun and it's enjoyable, that he can, he can get involved in it and not worry too much about the other side of it and the tactics, other than learning the skills. And then as he gets a little bit older, you develop and you go through the system. I do think it's fantastic. He's one of those players, and some of the kids, on the books at some of the bigger clubs are going to be his age already, and they'll be looking at their level of ability. God bless him, he's got my coordination, so he's got absolutely no hope. But nonetheless, if he enjoys it and takes something out of it, then I hope he does.
This is not about where our children. This isn't about success now, and I think this is the biggest problem that we have in football. We're constantly looking at the academy kids and going, "Oh, my son's as good. Why is my son not in the academy? Why is my daughter not in the academy?" And frankly, academies are closed shops past the age of 9. The number of kids who can get into an academy after that age group is minuscule. But then you look at the number of kids who go to an academy and then go on and play top flight football. It's minuscule anyway. So my view, and this evolved over many years of coaching my son and a number of other young players, is I'm not here to make you the next Lionel Messi at age 17. My job as a coach, and actually my job as a dad, is to make you a really interesting person to go for a pint with when you're 28.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm still involved in football, because how many people do you have the opportunity of working with 12, 15, 16 kids at a really great age, teaching them a valuable life skill like how to play football, but also how to work as a team, all these great crazy things, and then say, right, in 10 years time you're bloody buying me that pint.
Yeah, amen. I do think that's a big part of it. I do. So one of the things, going back a little bit to care before we close out, is we had a chat at the start about what our next episode is going to be. And our next episode, folks, is going to be a chap who had an experience of living with a poltergeist for many years. And I asked Michael about his opinion on this. And I don't know, you get a feel for people. And I thought Michael was going to tell me that it was bunkum, but I guess in terms of the industry that he's in, then maybe there is, maybe opportunities to see things. Did you want to sort of wax lyrical a little bit about some of your experiences then over the years? Because actually some of them really took me aback.
Yeah. So I definitely believe. I'd go further. I'd almost say that I know. So one of our care homes is a 1800s red brick old boys' school, I guess. The 1950s, 60s, it was a reform school. Some of the stories are quite horrible, frankly. If anyone is so minded, go onto YouTube, have a look for Kirby Grange in Muxlow in Leicestershire, and you will see a YouTube video about it. Some of the stories that we've been told by old boys who have come back have been harrowing, broken down in tears in front of us. We've even had some of them with a can of petrol and matches and try and set the old oak front doors alight. Very scary place. So when I say we think there are skeletons buried there, we're not entirely joking, unfortunately. We have planning consent for a very large refurbishment there, by the way, so we will probably end up digging them up. Over the years we've owned it, we've seen some stuff that we don't understand. We've seen globes of light moving across the first floor when we know there's no one up there with a torch. We know that there simply isn't. We've had seances where people have been in the room. This is my sister and my father, neither of whom believed. They're not believers. They didn't want to see this. They've seen a table get picked up and thrown across the room with no one touching it. We've had ladies in our care come up to us and say, "Could you stop the little boys coming into my room, please? I'm trying to sleep." Or, "Could you tell the children to stop kicking the ball against the wall? It's annoying me." Just to let you know, there are no little children around.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? And I guess some of those older properties, and I like I say, very, very sad to hear that those people had those horrible experiences in those homes obviously prior to you having them. But gee whiz, that must be bizarre. And like I say, just to see something, especially if, for your dad who is not a believer, what was his reaction to that? How did he come away with sort of seeing, somebody don't buy into those kind of things? What was his initial reaction?
He, we've always I guess we've always lived in characterful properties. It was actually that happened to be the final nail in the coffin. Is probably the wrong phrase, isn't it? That was the final straw that made him go, actually, you know what, there's something here. The first house we lived in was an old rectory, where I apparently saw a ghost age 2, and sort of spoke about it. The next house we lived in was another rectory, where there was a room where I ended up having a scale electrics track built for me and a small train track as a young child. And there was an old fireplace there, and he was just trying to rod a bird's nest out of it. And as he did so, he said it felt like there was ice crawling up his back. And as he pushed it free, something just released, and a wind came through the house, and every single door slam, 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 and this roar comes through. And he described it as a roar of wind came through the house, went straight up this fireplace. The house where I'm sat at the moment is haunted. We've got a little child walks the upstairs corridor. We've got an angry farmer outside. We've seen it. We've seen enough that we just can't explain anymore. So
that's fascinating. I mean, for me, it's fascinating. Like I say, someone who's curious about these things and had the odd experience here or there, but nothing, as you could nail your colours to the flag, as they were. But wow, I mean, I find it very interesting, and especially in those sort of homes. How regular are those experiences? Are they regular, or are they is there any science behind it?
In our care homes, it was a very regular thing until we had some exorcisms. We had 2 or 3 exorcisms, and so the third one sort of. The building is not happy. You can tell that it's not happy. It needs to be cleared out. But yeah, it's better. We've had a exorcism in this house. Full on, Catholic priest came in and, ringing the bells and all that. It seemed to help a bit. I think, I don't have any words for it. It's not something that I consciously think of anymore. It's more of that there is something out there that I seem to find, and I don't want to say I'm attuned to it, but you sense it sometimes, and you just go, okay, well, that's that thing over there, and that's just the way of the world. I can't explain it any more than that.
And that's the thing, and that's why it's called The Unexplained, isn't it? Thank you for sharing those stories. Not everybody, there's plenty of people who've had those experiences and aren't that comfortable talking about them because they don't think, people think I'm a lunatic talking about this. But the bottom line is that there are enough people out there talking about it that I genuinely believe there is something out there that we can't explain. And I appreciate you sharing those with us. I'm looking forward to hear. Hopefully, you'll tune in next week to find out the stories this chap wants to share as well. Cool. So we're a little bit over the hour mark, so we'll wrap it up now. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with, whether it be futsal or whether it be the care industry?
It was actually a question I promised myself I'd ask right at the start. So last time we spoke, I left you with the challenge of having a conversation with your family about their later life care needs. And I just wondered how that conversation went.
Yeah, so you did, to be fair, and I knew you were going to ask me. That's probably why I've talked as much as I can to deflect, and distract. But no, I have kind of had that conversation. I will
Mm.
be. I'll add a caveat to that. So I've seen my dad once in that time. It was his 80th birthday. Didn't seem the time to be having a conversation. But I have had the conversation with my mum.
Okay.
But the important thing, as I need to say, is it wasn't me who brought it up. Now, every time I've gone around there, it's been in the back of my mind that I do
Mm.
need to have this conversation. Like I said, I've had two brothers who work, one who works in the care industry, one who has worked in the care industry, and he is a teacher as well. So and my mum always it's like a joke in my family that if she needs to rely on anybody, it ain't me. I'm the guy who turns up with a box of chocolates and brings the kids around. We have a chat, and
Hmm.
and that's it. That's all about all I'm good for. But my brothers, who are much more useful than me in that sort of area. The guys who probably, I feel bad saying it, but the guys who have stepped up. So my mum had to stay in hospital recently. She dislocated a hip rather unexpectedly. And Mark, who is my younger brother, obviously he was there. He's been brilliant. And my other brother John, to be fair, does the other stuff as well. He runs around, does all the shopping for her. Again, I do what I do. I turn up and talk nonsense for an hour with her once a week, and she seems happy with that, bless her. But yeah, we have had the conversation, and she's 75 now. She's pretty sprightly, other than once she gets some mobility sorted out from the issues that she's had, she'll be fine. But can get a little bit maudlin, obviously, when you're stuck in your own home. And so she has sort of initiated that conversation with me, and I have to say, did I find it uncomfortable? Yeah, I did a little bit because, I think we're all afraid of our own mortality. We're all afraid of our parents' mortality and accepting that one day they're not going to be here and they've been a massive part of our lives the same way that we are a part of our children's lives. But yeah, we have talked about it, what she wants, and how she wants things to pan out if it goes one way or another. I'm not going to share them on the podcast, obviously. But yeah, it was an interesting conversation. And it's
Well
one that
done.
yeah, no, in truth, it's one that I probably would have glossed over and changed the subject and offered her another chocolate. However, with your voice in the back of my mind, I thought, "Do you know what? I do need to have this conversation." Whereas in the past, she's probably tried to have it with me in the past 10 times, and I've not had it with her.
Yeah. Well done for having it. It's a really good conversation to have, and yeah, and also well done for getting her out of hospital quickly enough after the hip fall and back home, and you're focusing on mobility. That's sounds like a really great process that you're going through there.
Yeah, she's pretty sprightly. She is pretty sprightly, to be fair. She's a little old Welsh lady, and she doesn't take much. She doesn't take much knockbacks. I know she'll get over it, and it's the frustration with her. She's very, very. She used to be very, very mobile, and
Mhm.
isn't at the moment. So she runs a care, or was played her part in running a care home locally, where they raised funds for different cancer charities, and that's been her focus, and she's something she cares passionately about, and hopefully she can get back to it soon, because at the moment obviously she's not able to. Like I say, the hip was out of place for quite some time. She probably won't thank me for talking about this, but yeah, so the hip was out of place for some time, and it has affected her mobility in her ankle. But she's been set a challenge to do these exercises, and I tell you what, she is not saying no, irrespective of the discomfort that it causes. So yeah, fair play to her. And
Oh, fair play. That's brilliant to hear. And if she is listening, congratulations, well done. Keep going, and hope you get back to fighting fit soon.
if she's listening, I'm gonna get my ass kicked for talking about it on the pod.
But I genuinely don't think you should, because what she's done there, expressed a vulnerability, opened up to you, explained something that's really important, and given you and your family a chance to really make sure that her wishes are looked after to the best extent possible. And that's such a valuable gift that she's given you there. It's great.
It is, and like I say, and being really honest, it was with your voice in the back of my mind that I did persist in that conversation. Yeah, so it was an interesting one. I'll have the conversation with my dad one day, but generally when my dad and I get together, we normally talk about beer and football, and that's it. So that's going to be a bit more of a push.
Well, all the best with that conversation.
Thank you. So, did you want to leave us with anything? Any other thoughts?
I just going to encourage everyone to have that conversation with their family.
Amen. Amen. And listen, having someone who is not very comfortable with doing that kind of thing, I can honestly say it is hugely, hugely beneficial. So thank you, Michael, for forcing me down that route. I do appreciate it. Still got the other one to go down with me dad. Fortunately, he's pretty sprightly, just turned 80. And to be honest with you, he looks like my elder brother more than my dad. He's got a far better head of hair than I have. I can promise you that. God bless him. I don't know why, but I hope my kids inherit his hairline and not mine. So yeah. On that note, we will wrap it up, and we will join you next week when we will be talking about something entirely different again.